the return of Charge It, the amazing kick of Cairo Consort, and so much more on this episode of the Win Play Show. Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans. I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis, back with another episode of the Win Place Show, a conversation show about horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Trust the Profits YouTube network. Now, make sure to follow Trust the Profits on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, as we are the one-stop shop for everything you need to know about horse racing, especially as we heat up towards the Kentucky Derby season. Every week, I have obviously the weekly Win Play Show where I recap races, preview future races, keep you update with horse racing news. Every week, I also do Capping the Card, where myself and a guest go through every single race on a card. This week, very special guest, as we go to Aqueduct for the Withers Stakes card on Saturday, none other than morning line maker for New York, David Aragona, is going to be joining me. He is going to be my special guest on this week's episode of Capping the Card, so you don't want to miss it. Even if you think I'm wrong, David's almost never wrong. So he's a great person and one of the most knowledgeable people about horse racing, full stop. And really honored to have him on the show. Should be a lot of fun, so make sure to tune into that. But listen, it's not just about me. It's about El Hombre on Thursday nights in the Winner's Lounge, always having fun. It's about Colin Sheehan and all of his Kentucky Derby preview coverage. It's about the formula and the graded stakes previews that he's doing. It's about our Kentucky Derby top 25 list on a weekly basis. So much content. Like I said, if you're into Derby, we got plenty for that. If you're into just regular racing and handicapping, we're into that. If you want to focus on the graded stakes races, we got that. We have everything. So make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits. Now, also, if you want to stay up to what I'm doing on a daily basis and my insights in handicapping, feel free to follow me on Twitter at the handle @Failed to Menace. Always enjoy interacting with fans and followers. Always a lot of fun. We have a big week, obviously, here on the Win Play Show. A lot of news to cover, recapping what was an eventful Holy Bull Day on Saturday. Saw some big performances, obviously, both in that race as well as on the undercard. But let's just dive right into what's going on and recapping the weekend. And going to bring back a little segment that I used to do on my old variation of the Win Play Show of what I got right, what I got wrong. Listen to some feedback from listeners, and they kind of like the idea of, listen, you got to hold yourself accountable, and you got to, not only puff your chest out when you're right, but you got to, deflate the ego a little bit when you're wrong. And so, like I said, what I got right, what I got wrong from the weekend. It's a fun way to run through some of the recaps. I'm not going to go through all 12 races on the Gulfstream Park card, but we are going to focus on, obviously, the big stakes races and graded stakes races. And so we'll start off with what I got right, and that was General Jim. That's right, General Jim in the Swale Stakes. That was one where Super Chow, if you remember, was the morning line favorite, the post-time favorite. There were a lot of questions about Super Chow. And myself and my colleague and guest last week on Capping the Card, Ashley Mayu, we both doubted Super Chow. We just didn't think Super Chow would be able to get the distance of 7 furlongs. Indeed, that's exactly what happened. General Jim, who is more of a miler, cutting back to 7 furlongs, was able to run Super Chow down late. The two of them really extended from the rest of the field. And Super Chow, I have to say, I thought still turned in a much better effort than what I was anticipating. So while I got my pick of General Jim correct, and amazingly second choice at 8-5, which wasn't great odds, but it was better than 4-5 odds on Super Chow. It's one of those things where Super Chow, like I said, didn't give in, and I thought showed a little bit more at 7 furlongs than I was anticipating. I thought that might be a horse who was a little defeated. Well, I should say, didn't face, I think, the pace pressure that I was expecting. There was a scratch in that race as well, and that's one of the things that defined Holy Bull Day. Of course, 3 of the turf races getting taken off the turf, putting on the Tapeta, a lot of scratches. Obviously, that impacts not only your entries, but it impacts pace dynamics. It impacts race setup. Obviously, the sheer race size is a bigger factor there as well. But that was one which, like I said, General Jim wasn't a huge price, but got you home there and got you a winner. Cairo Consort. Wow, what an effort. Just an amazing effort. I had a friend text me right after the break and said, if she can pull this off, she's going to be like Flightline. And unbelievable. If you missed the Swedish Chance Stakes, do yourself a favor, folks, and go back to YouTube and find that race. Cairo Consort completely blows the break. I mean, completely is looking the other direction, kind of rears up a little bit, and finally gets going, spots the field at least six, I think closer to 7, 8 lengths. And Irad Ortiz Jr., say what you will about him. And a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Irad, especially when he runs up in New York. But I mean, that was a masterclass of getting a horse to settle, bringing Cairo Consort, just catching up to the pack, essentially, staying in the back and not overcorrecting and letting Cairo Consort kind of get into the flow of the race a little bit. And then when she kicked for home, wow, was that a kick? And just wove through traffic. And then once Irad got her out in the clear, see you later. And that was just such a good effort for Cairo Consort, who ended up nailing a big Alphabella, a big long shot at the wire by won by about a length, but it just was so much the best. And one of those things where Cairo Consort, important to remember, she finished third in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf and was beaten by another horse that I like a lot, who was actually my top pick that day, who finished second, Pleasant Passage, the Shug McGahee horse. Now, it's important to point out, Shug McGahee's horse, Pleasant Passage, has not worked out since that Breeders' Cup. Meanwhile, Cairo Consort has gone on and won, not one, but 2 stakes races since then. So, I mean, she's the real deal. Big fan of this filly. Really like her a lot. Anybody who watches the show knows that I'm also a big fan of Graham Motion's Spenderella. I think she's one of the. I was so bummed out that she was hurt last year, wasn't able to run. G. Laurie, another Graham Motion horse I really like a lot on the turf. So there's some really nice turf fillies in our crop right now that we have to appreciate. And they don't all come from Chad Brown's barn. So Cairo Consort, though, what an effort, and easily the most impressive thing I saw this weekend. And then in the Holy Bull Stakes, I steered you in the right direction there as well with Rocket Can. Went off at 3-5. I mean, talk about a gift. And I was not sold on Cyclone Mischief. I thought that last race was a little bit of an anomaly. I did not particularly like some of the company that Cyclone Mischief had beaten in terms of, I just didn't think that horse really beat anybody. And I just had a hard time trusting a Dale Romans horse in this spot. And that's not to say Dale Romans is not a very accomplished trainer. He is. I just didn't trust Cyclone Mischief in this spot with him. Saffy Joseph Jr.'s horse, Lord Miles, gets bet way down to 5-2, and you end up getting 3-1 on Rocket Can, who had a very wide trip, I should say. He definitely wasn't able to clear. He was 3-4 wide, I think, most of that first turn, went wide coming for home as well. So, he traveled a lot of extra ground in addition to that mile and a 16th. I thought a very nice effort, a professional effort. Didn't come back with a huge buyer speed figure, only an 82, which is exactly the same number he ran prior to the layoff when he actually lost a Confidence Game, who finished third in the Lecomte. So a lot of moving pieces to keep in mind when we try to kind of make sure we're keeping track of how everybody's doing in comparison to each other in terms of, well, Confidence Game beat Rocket Can, and then Confidence Game got beat by Instant Coffee. So, this A equals B equals C sort of transitive property, which is very tricky to do and very foolhardy, I think, to do in horse racing sometimes, because so many things can impact a performance on a particular day. But, also it should be pointed out, Newgate coming off the bench, basically 10 weeks and winning a grade 3 race is impressive. Second time out, I'm interested to see what he does. It looks like Bill Mott is going to be focused him on the Fountain of Youth, and so we'll see what he does there. Well, if you watched my Santa Anita Stakes preview with Gina Piccola, then you also know that I got a couple of picks right out at Santa Anita in the stakes races. Newgate, not really surprising. That was, I think, in my opinion, the obvious pick for that race. And I think the big takeaway there was nobody really impressed me from that race. It was the 4-horse race with all Baffert entries. Hard to figure. 12-1 finishes second. Newgate just kind of grinds out a win. That's kind of the horse that he is, in my opinion. He doesn't have a dazzling turn of foot. He doesn't have great early speed. He just grinds, and he eventually wears you down and gets you if you're in the right type of field. And this was the right type of field for him, not just in terms of the size of the field, but in terms of the quality of the field, I think. Worcester is a good horse, but I don't know if Worcester is really a two-turn horse. And then Arabian Lion, I was stunned that horse took as much money as he did. And I was stunned that he was installed as such a relatively heavy, not heavy favorite, but such short odds on the morning line as well. I just didn't see it coming off that last place finish at the Los Alamitos Futurity. I know Los Al can be a little bit wonky with the results sometimes, but to me, Arabian Lion didn't do a lot to garner that amount of support. And Bob Baffert certainly sounded a little disappointed after that race and the effort Arabian Lion turned in. Seems like, he realizes that horse may not want that distance and there are some limitations there. So look for Arabian Lion if he does come back anytime soon to do it at a one-turn level. And then the real big hit, though, I mean, honestly, it was a very chalky day at Gulfstream Park with a couple of exceptions that I'll get to in a second. But Quattro L, what a race. And that was one both Gino and I gave out in the megahertz stakes at Santa Anita and paid off a $23 winner there. 8-1 on the morning line, went up to about 10-1 by post time. And this is just a horse Gino and I pointed out just never turns in a bad effort. This is always a really honest horse and just got the right pace set up. And sometimes that also all it is. I think that's so important when you're looking at PPs, not just to look at how often this horse wins, but if a horse is just always turning in an honest effort, looking at those fractions and looking at the race shape and going, has this horse gotten the right setup yet? And Quattro is just a horse that hadn't really gotten the right setup and did on Saturday and got it at a big price. And so hopefully a few of you, even if you didn't pick him to win, maybe you included him on your, pick 4, pick 5, pick 6 tickets, things like that. So hopefully it got you a little bit of money there with Quattro. Now, listen, I got a lot of things right, but I got a lot of things wrong too. One of the things I got wrong, Major Dude. That was a horse both Ashley and I were trying to beat and in a stakes action at Gulfstream Park, but he came back and showed he was much the best. I thought that was a really impressive effort. Second back from the Breeders' Cup for Major Dude, who I just is a horse that I've kind of been selling short a little bit or betting against and having relative luck doing that to this point. Candidate, my top pick, finished second in that race. Interesting race dynamic. Candidate had the inside position, but didn't go to the lead and rated, which is not what that horse does. And I thought rated okay, finished second. Like I said, was never really in doubt, though. Major Dude proved to be much the best in that race. And like I said, Todd Pletcher's got a good one on the turf there. So we'll be excited to see what happens next for Major Dude. Red Carpet Ready, turning in a big effort for trainer Rusty Arnold. That was one where that horse got bet down a lot. Red Carpet Ready ended up going off as, if I'm not mistaken, the post-time favorite in that race. And I was really hesitant to embrace Red Carpet Ready in that spot. My pick was Positano Sunset, who finished fourth in that race, turned in a fine effort. But Red Carpet Ready, part of the reason I played against that horse or just didn't really consider him, I shouldn't say played against because he wasn't the favorite. Atomically was the favorite, and I think finished third in that race. And I maybe needed one. I talked about that on Capping the Card. I thought Atomically might need one back, and it looks like that would probably be the case. I'm still not entirely sure how good Atomically is, but next time out, I think it'll be a better barometer. But nevertheless, with Red Carpet Ready, part of the reason I didn't really consider this horse is his trainer, Rusty Arnold, 0 for 47 with horses coming off of at least a 2-month layoff going into this. And that was a stat you can go, well, people run hot and cold and things. And absolutely right. There was a point where Steve Asmussen hadn't won a race in Kentucky in like a year, almost like 89 races or something like that. So things happen that are fluky. But that was one where I'm not against, I don't play trainer stats all the time, but I'm not going to go all in on a horse that's ends up going off as a more post-time favorite with a trainer stat like that. That's a hard pill for me to swallow to go, 0 for 47. I'll bet 5-2 odds on that horse. I mean, I'll bet maybe 8-1 odds on that horse, but going off as a post-time favorite, I thought that was a little too short, but hey, proved to be much the best. So credit to Red Carpet Ready, Rusty Arnold, great trainer, but just had been on the schneid there with horses coming back from the layoffs for a while. And then one of the races that I was wrong on that was not a greatest stakes race was Tapit Trice and the allowance race on the undercard of the Holy Bull. Both Ashley and I really liked Shesterkin, and that was a weird race. That was a weird race setup. And Tapit Trice got a very nice buyer speed figure from that, got a 92 buyer. But that was one where when you watch a race, sometimes you know within the first 5 seconds that the race isn't going to go your way. And that was kind of the feeling I had watching that allowance race where they broke and Shesterkin, who has by far and away the best early speed in that field, decided to rate. And I did not like that at all because there was no real speed. If you look at the fractions, they were very pedestrian. I think 25 and 50 for the opening quarter and half. And that race was there for the taking if a horse wanted to just go to the lead, I thought. And Shesterkin decided to rate. And what happened was Tapit Trice, behind a very slow pace, was very close to the lead, was only about 3 lengths off. You put Tapit Trice 3 lengths off the lead, he's going to have more than enough to kick for home. I mean, this is a horse that is more of a deep closer, and he didn't even have to be that deep, and he proved it. He could close no problem. So that was one of the race shape just set up perfectly for Tapit Trice. But I also think I underestimated maybe how good Tapit Trice was. I liked him a lot, maybe overestimated Shesterkin a little bit, but Shesterkin finished second in that race. But you saw later, as Pete Aiello said, the stablemate Tapit Trice said, "See you later" to the other stablemate Shesterkin, both in Todd Pletcher's barn. Really good effort there for Tapit Trice, who looks like maybe headed to the Fountain of Youth next as well, taking a step up there. And that's, like I said, those undercard races. We saw a horse like Determinedly, Tapit's Conquest on the undercard of LeCompte. Now we see Tapit Trice, Shesterkin on the undercard of Holy Bull. These undercard races important to pay attention to on the Derby Trail. Now out west, like I said, we previewed with myself and Gino Piccola, previewed the Santa Anita races, the Santa Monica Stakes. Fun to Dream, the Bob Baffert horse, who was the morning line favorite. Gino and I think both acknowledged very tough to beat. We both tried to beat her anyway with Awake at Midnight, who ended up finishing second. But Fun to Dream just has Awake at Midnight's number. Awake at Midnight beat her once, but has not beaten her since. And Fun to Dream is just a really, really nice horse. A very chalky finish. Those were the top 2 favorites by far. And they finished 1-2 in that spot. But obviously, Bob Baffert, very strong effort there for Fun to Dream in the Santa Monica Stakes. And then in the Thunder Road Stakes, I mean, just chaos. That was Earl's Rock ends up winning that race. And there were about 5 horses in contention there at the end. And that was another one where the race setup was kind of, the horse that we expected to go to the lead didn't go to the lead. Other horses went to the lead. Frankie Dettori got a horse on the lead, and that was kind of unexpected. And so it just, like I said, threw some of the pace setup off. I kind of liked the idea of, Hit Show ran a decent race. That was kind of my top pick. I thought There Goes Harvard would run better, finished last. So There Goes Harvard did not run very well. There Goes Harvard had been an interesting horse who had been showing a lot of ability on both dirt and turf. Pretty clearly, you should probably just stick to dirt at this point, where he's beaten Country Grammar, beaten Royal Ship, beaten a lot of nice horses. So very capable horse in terms of There Goes Harvard on the dirt, but not on the turf that day. So credit to Earl's Rock at a big price, winning that Thunder Road Stakes. But like I said, that was a lot of fun this weekend in terms of what I got right, what I got wrong. Capping the card, top picks, 2 of them scratched, but out of the other 10, we got 4 winners. And despite it being a chalky weekend, returned to 262 ROI. So nothing that's going to get me in the National Horse Racing Hall of Fame or anything like that, but not bad numbers. Let's shift to what was the most impressive thing I saw this weekend other than Cairo Consort, because she wins going away by a mile. And the answer to that is Charge It. Now, Charge It returned to action after an 8-month layoff. This is, of course, the horse that won the Dwyer by 23 lengths. And anybody who says, well, that Dwyer field wasn't really that much, remember the second place horse? Running Son of a Gun, who's turned into a pretty nice horse in his own right, as a grade 3 winning horse. So he beat some decent competition that day. And several of the other horses have come back to win more races since then. So not just Running Son of a Gun, but Charge It returns to action in a division that desperately needs it, especially after what we saw at the Pegasus, where our collector looks like is going into retirement. I talked about this last week, where you're just kind of looking around going, where is everybody? Because White Abario ain't it. Simplification ain't it. And so you go, well, what's out there on the West Coast? You got Express Train, you got Royal Ship, you got Stiletto Boy still maybe. You got some horses there. You got Country Grammar, obviously, but Hot Rod Charlie's retired now. Taba, and there's just not much, especially in the East Coast, in terms of older horses. And for that male dirt route division, and Chargett returns and was never asked. That was the most impressive thing. He returned and he was never asked. Very hot fractions up in the front end, and he was really close to that front end speed, and everybody else just completely wilted. And he just kind of kept on, and Luis Saez's jockey never really asked. And that was pretty obviously the plan. Pletcher did not want his horse to be taxed in any way, and he wasn't. He ran his race and looked all the better for it afterwards. The plan, according to Pletcher, is to focus on the Met Mile and the Whitney as the next two steps for Chargett. But of course, there's got to be something between now and the Met Mile. So look for him to try to find another spot, maybe a small listed stakes race of some capacity, maybe at a mile, probably at a mile, I would imagine, to prep for that Met Mile. So, that's the best thing I saw this weekend, because at least there's a little injection of oomph into that handicap division, which was really sorely lacking it. Now, what was the most frustrating thing I saw all weekend? Well, that's easy. That was myself, actually, because there was a horse that won on the earlier part of the undercard on Holy Bull Day, Gun Maestro. Gun Maestro is a horse that went off at 18-1. And my good friend and guest of the program, Sarah El-Badwi, texted me after the race and said, great call on Gun Maestro. And I thought to myself, what is she talking about? Because I did not pick Gun Maestro. At which point, Sarah reminded me that the last time Gun Maestro ran, I was all in on that horse, which I was. I went back and looked at my notes, and indeed, I was all in on Gun Maestro last time out. And he was coming back from a really long layoff, but had kept excellent company up in some really good races up in New York. And I thought was ready to fire coming off the bench. Finished fourth that day, but a close-up fourth. Comes back and wins next time out. And I thought to myself, why, oh, why did I not pay more attention to my own notes with Gun Maestro? Very frustrating when, arguably maybe the only really big long shot on the card is a horse that I really liked last time out. Didn't pick this time out. So that was one where I kicked myself a little bit. I also casually blamed DRF because my notes on Gun Maestro didn't show up for some reason on my DRF, even though I know I'd take all my notes there. So not going to sue anybody for that, but that's one of those things. We've all had those moments where oh God, I love that horse last time. Why didn't I bet that horse back? Always a good reminder to bet a horse back. Also a good reminder to set virtual stables up. Honestly, it's something I did after Sarah texted me. I said, I've been meaning to do this for a while. I always rely on just my handwritten notes or my notes in DRF and my memory. And, I got to start setting up a stable. I'm 42. My memory's not getting any better. And so Gun Maestro, though, all the credit. And like I said, when all else fails, bet Gun Runner. That's not a bad odds. And when you get 18-1 on a Gun Runner, yeah, definitely bet a Gun Runner. Now, where does all of this leave us after a really busy weekend? Well, it's interesting. As it pertains to the Kentucky Derby, it kind of still leaves us in the same spot. We keep thinking every single week that we're going to have some breakthrough, that we're going to have some moment that's going to provide some clarity or provide some more structure to the Derby picture. And every weekend, we just kind of go, I don't still know. I think that we got Forte and Arabian Night and maybe Victory Formation and a couple of other horses we really like up top. And then it's a whole lot of stuff in between, like 6 and 25 in terms of your ranking Derby horses. And we've just not seen a horse really deliver a wow moment. As I mentioned, Newgate was less than impressive in my opinion. I know he came back with a 100 buyer speed figure, but that race his style just doesn't really wow you in any way. Hit Show comes back with a less than impressive figure. Yes, Tapit Trice looked nice on the undercard, but like I said, got the right pace set up, and let's also not turn an allowance race into a grade 1 by any stretch. And so, we're kind of still left wondering, like, what's going to come next? We still have yet to be wowed. Like I said, I think Arabian Night is the horse this year that's probably wowed me the most. But that said, Instant Coffee is probably the horse that has proven the most this year as a 3-year-old. The only horse, I believe, in the country who has 2 graded stakes wins as a 3-year-old on the dirt. So He's a horse that at least has the resume, even if I don't love his riding style for the Kentucky Derby. He's got the resume and the fact that he easily beat Confidence Game. Again, this transitive property easily beat Confidence Game, who beat Rocket Can. It just makes you think there's not a lot of other competition out there. And a horse like Instant Coffee probably should be considered a legitimate contender until proven otherwise. And there's going to be plenty of opportunity to be proven otherwise between now and the first weekend in May. But like I said, I think we're still left wondering, are we going to see something special? We might very well this weekend, and we'll get to that in a second. Well, let's shift away from racing and on the track and talk a little bit about breeding news, because obviously, if you're on Twitter, you've seen a ton of colts being born. It's that time of year. Babies are getting born. Everybody's excited about seeing the new colts and their mamas and their what dads are given, how many colts or fillies are being born to different sires and things like that. So it's a lot of fun, but there's also big breeding news in terms of Flightline. Of course, the horse of the year, the horse of the world in that regard, who also won the Longines Horse of the Year internationally, who's already retired after 6 races, is breeding to 4 horses. They've announced 10 overall horses. Thoroughbred Daily News had this information, but 4 I thought were particularly noteworthy. He will be, the dams will be bred to Flightline Little Princess Emma. Who is Little Princess Emma? Well, that is the dam of one Triple Crown winner, American Pharaoh. Delightful Quality, another horse that will be bred to Flightline. Essential Qualities dam. Obligatory, who we just saw, unfortunately, come back from the Breeders' Cup, did not fire particularly well, but is a graded stakes winner in her own right, is going to be bred to Flightline. That's going to be a hell of a sprint horse right there, whoever she gives birth to. And then Queen Caroline, who is Forte's dam, is also going to be bred to Flightline. So you got the dams that gave birth to American Pharaoh, Essential Quality, and Forte are all going to get bred to Flightline, in addition to Obligatory. I like that a lot. And so if you watched my show with Jessica Tugwell a couple of weeks back, about a month ago, she talked about he's going to have every shot to show how good of a sire he is, because he is going to get the absolute best broodmares that are out there. And that's what you're seeing right off the bat. So a lot of things, obviously we're excited about this new crop, but a lot of exciting siring news and breeding news coming up for next year as we look forward to what Flightline can do as a sire. Well, let's also move to some training news that has some big impacts on the Kentucky Derby, and that is, of course, centered around Bob Baffert and the never-ending saga around the Medina Spirit positive test and the subsequent 2-year ban from Churchill Downs. Most recently, Mr. Baffert was in court seeking an injunction against Churchill Downs for this 2-year ban. Of course, last year, remember, horses were transitioned to other barns, qualified to get points, ran in the Derby, then transferred back to Bob Baffert after the Kentucky Derby. This year, there is a new deadline that horses must be transferred to a new barn by February 28th, the end of February, if they want to earn points in any race. So even if they transfer, let's say March 15th, and then they run in the Santa Anita Derby, okay, it won't count. They won't get points. They have to be transferred to a new barn by February 28th. So Baffert cannot wait until the last second to do it like he did last year. It's got to happen sooner. He's seeking an injunction. It seems unlikely that it's going to happen at this point. And so therefore, over the next couple of weeks, expect there to be serious news about where these horses are going. I think that's maybe why we've not maybe heard more about what are the plans for horses like Faustin. What are the plans for a horse like Cave Rock, who has not yet even returned to the workout tab, if I'm not mistaken, and is looking more and more like a variation of Corniche from last year. I think that's why we've not heard more about some of these horses and what they might be doing next. A few of his horses are geared towards the San Felipe, but there's going to be obviously some shakeup in terms of where these horses are headed, whether it goes back to Tim Yaktine, whether McCarthy takes on some horses, which I think might be pretty likely out there, whether some other trainers end up, getting some of this stock. Of course, very famously, Life is Good went to Todd Pletcher. We'll see if any of these ownership groups end up going to other big names. But one of the things you have to remember is these ownership groups have been very, very loyal to Bob Baffert. And I would not expect these horses to go to another huge name on the Derby Trail like Brad Cox, Steve Asmussen, Todd Pletcher, Chad Brown. I would imagine these horses are going to stay out in that California circuit and then be transferred back once the Kentucky Derby is over. So we'll see. It's never ending saga. I've been covering this for 2 years, and it's just every month it feels like there's a new variation of this story. I think the most frustrating part is that we're getting close to the end of this ban, right? This is the last year the ban is going to be actually be effective. And it just seems like it's getting pettier and nastier at the end of it. And that's frustrating, I think, from a standpoint of a sports fan. I think the other part of this is, Churchill Downs is not universally beloved. It's one thing if you take a stand against a trainer who may not have the best approval rating and people kind of go, yeah, that's right. Stick it to him, sort of a thing. It's not as if Churchill Downs is beloved. Ask the people working at Calder, ask the people working at Arlington Park how much they like Churchill Downs. They're not the most likely hero in all of this. And so I think that's what makes this just kind of a yucky story for a lot of people in horse racing, that it's an organization that not everybody loves necessarily, taking a stand against a trainer not everybody has strong feelings for, or they have strong feelings for, but they're not positive. And, it just ultimately leaves us in a kind of a tough spot here, just a few months out from the Kentucky Derby, and we'll have to wait and see where some of the best horses end up going this year. David Aragona, my guest this week on Capping the Card, tweeted out some amazing statistics about the incredibly high percentage of Baffert horses who have recorded a 95 or higher speed figure among the entire 3-year-old crop. I want to say 75% of the 95 plus buyer speed figure that have been recorded by the 3-year-old male crop have been recorded by horses within Bob Baffert's barn. That's incredible. And I think 75% of the 100 plus speed figures recorded have also been within the Bob Baffert barn. Again, incredible. So he's got the best stock, and say what you will about his tactics, or say what you will about, the innuendos that are always flying around about him, but he's also got the best horses in a lot of cases. The bad horses don't sell for $2.3 million. He's got good quality. He's got good stock out there, and they run like heck for him. And so we'll see. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how this shakes up the Derby field. Now, what do we got coming up this week? Well, I mentioned Capping the Card with David Aragona. We're going to cover all the races on the Withers card. Should be a lot of fun. Can't wait to pick David's brain and get his insight. Like I said, will be wonderful. We got a lot of Derby preps coming up this weekend. We got the Withers featuring Hit Show and Arctic Arrogance. Hit Show, who is a 10-1 shot in the Southwest, is now 8-5 shot in the Withers. Yikes, that should tell you everything you need to know about that field. Also features horses like 99% Matty and Andiamo a Firenze, a horse that I'm always a sucker for because he's half to Firenze Fire, who I love because he bit Yalpin. It's just great. In the Sam F. Davis, you got W&L, who I think is a really interesting horse. Won the Remsen first time back from the since running in that Remsen. Remember the Remsen last year, everybody was like, meh. And then early voting won the Preakness and Mo Donegal won the Belmont. So the Remsen came back pretty damn good last year. I don't know if it's going to come back good this year, but certainly an interesting race down at Tampa Bay Downs. I'm going to have a Tampa Bay Stakes preview with my man Barry Spears, who's going to be on track working for Tampa Bay Downs this weekend for their big day. Speaking of Tampa Bay Downs and their big day, the Sun Coast Stakes looks like it's going to be a showdown between Wonder Wheel, the juvenile filly champion of the Breeders' Cup, and Julia Shining, the full sister to Malathat, who is undefeated to this point. So that should be a really great showdown. And then finally, out at Golden Gate, can't forget this, Matt Dinnerman, who is going to be Colin Sheehan's guest this week on Doubling Down. Matt Dinnerman, of course, calls the races out at Golden Gate Park, which is where they will be having the third of the 3 Kentucky Derby preps, the El Camino Real. So listen, we're bringing you David Aragona, we're bringing you Matt Dinnerman, we're bringing you some of the biggest names from the sports to get their insights to help you out on your big days. Well, that's it for me. Like I said, make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.